Myron Golden here. Welcome to today's video. I'm going to be talking to you about $1 million fantasy versus $1 million reality and why most people will never be millionaires. And when I say most people will never be millionaires, you know, that doesn't sound very encouraging. That doesn't sound very positive. But it's not that most people won't be millionaires because they can't. It's most people won't be millionaires because they won't. And so when I talk about $1 million fantasy versus $1 million reality, I'm going to tell you first what I believe is the $1 million fantasy. People believe they're going to become a millionaire just because they want to. Just because you have the desire to become a millionaire doesn't mean you're going to become one. They think they're going to become a millionaire, or they believe they're going to become a millionaire by working harder. Like, I'm going to work hard enough to become a millionaire. And the reality is, I mean, just think about this. People who are making 100 times more money than you, they're not working 100 times harder than you. People that are making 100 times more money than you, they're not working 100 times more hours. I'm going to work longer hours and I'm going to work harder. And I'm going to show you why that thinking is fallacy, right? The people believe that if I work harder and I work longer, then I deserve the result. But that's not exactly how it works. And so, but they're not 100 times. They're not working 100 times more hours. They're not working 100 times longer. They're not 100 times smarter. Guess what? They're not 100 times smarter than you. They don't know 100 times more than you. So why are people who are making 100 times more money than you making 100 times more money than you? Well, because they simply know something that works 100 times better than what you know works. And most people have this fantasy desire to be a millionaire as if that somehow has something to do with something. The problem with that is the formula most people have is wrong. The formulas most people have are wrong. One of the formulas is this: time is money. Well, time is not money, right? And so if I were going to write it on the board, I would say most people believe this, and this is why they'll never be millionaires. Time is money, right? Well, that is a fallacy. Time is not money. In fact, if I were going to actually write the formula the way it is, I'd have to get rid of this, and I'd have to say time is more valuable than money. Time is greater than money. But if I were going to do it to its fullest extreme, I'd have to say time is infinitely more valuable than money. Now, that's the real equation right there. Time is infinitely more valuable than money. But the reason the cultural hypnotic societal mechanism wants us to believe that time is money, which is the ultimate financial lie, is if I believe time is money, what I'll do is I'll sell a whole bunch of my time, I'll trade a whole bunch of my time for a little bit of somebody else's money. Are y'all tracking? And so instead, what I need to do is I need to realize that time's more valuable than money, and when I do, I'm going to operate very differently in relation to time and money than the majority of people in the world. Not only that, but if I believe time is money, I'm going to do something else that's not very smart. I'm going to waste a lot of time trying to save a little bit of money. This is why people wash their own car. Do you understand it doesn't make sense for you to wash your car when they have automatic car washes? It is a waste of time. Time is the stuff that life is made of. Money's not the stuff that life is made of, right? It doesn't make sense for you to cut. You want to be a millionaire and you still cut your own grass. It doesn't make sense. You want to be a millionaire, you clean your own house. Like, I'm not saying that these things are not important. I'm just saying, like, one of the things that I've found out is when I hire somebody to do something for me that saves me time, it ultimately makes me more money. Because I can spend my 3 hours cutting the grass, or I can pay somebody to cut the grass, and I can take that 3 hours, and then I can coach 3 people at $25,000 an hour and make $75,000, right? So we're thinking about it wrong, right? So most people have $1 million fantasy because they believe time is money. In fact, I can prove to you right now that time's not money. If I said to you, I'll give anybody here $1 million check, I'll write you $1 million check, yeah, it'll clear. I'll write you $1 million check. Who wants that check, right? Like you're watching me on YouTube from all over the place. You want that check, just type me, right? Okay, right? But what if I said, in order for me to write you that check, you have to end your life today? Now who wants that check? Nobody does. Why? Because you already instinctively, intuitively know that time is greater than money. Now, let's put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say that you got some curable disease, but the cure is let's call the cure $1 million. And let's say $1 million is all you have. It's all you have in your retirement. It's all you have in all of your savings put together. But the cure is $1 million. And it has worked for everybody who's ever used it, and it's not covered by insurance. How many of you would buy that cure, right? 100%. Why? Because you already know that time is more valuable than money. So if it makes sense to save your life, to use your money, to buy more time, why don't people see that it makes sense to use your money to buy back time while you're still alive and not at the end of your life, right? If I save 3 days of my life, if I do it in the middle of my life or at the end of my life, it all ends up the same way. So as many days as I can save in the middle of my life, perhaps that's how many days I add to the end of my life. Wouldn't that be pretty cool, right? So that's one problem. This is one reason why most people have $1 million fantasy and will never experience $1 million reality. Another reason that most people will never experience $1 million reality is because we've all been programmed by what I call the cultural hypnotic societal mechanism. We've all been programmed to be for what's against us and against what's for us. That's why people eat the chocolate cake instead of the apple, right? Because we've been programmed to be what's for us instead of what's against us and be against what's for us. That's why most people will watch the television show instead of reading the book that's going to help them do better. Why? Because we've been programmed to be for what's against us and against what's for us. And so ultimately, most people spend their whole lives self-sabotaging. I read Og Mandino, the author of The Greatest Salesman in the World, Part 1 and Part 2. He's also The Choice, The Greatest Miracle in the World, the University of Success Unlimited. In his book, The University of Success Unlimited, he had one of my favorite quotes of all times, and it was this: "The path is smooth. Why do you throw stones before you?" Right? And that's exactly how most people live their lives. Most people live their lives throwing stones on a smooth path so they can feel smarter and tougher and better for walking down that path. It's a level of insanity. So what should we do instead? We should do something that works better. So when I say we're for what's against us and against what's for us, specifically what am I talking about? What I'm talking about is most of the things that can create wealth for you and your family, you've been programmed to ignore them and disregard them as a get-rich-quick scheme. I remember I used to do multi-level marketing. I don't do multi-level marketing anymore, but I used to do multi-level marketing. And when I did multi-level marketing, people say, "Is this a get-rich-quick scheme?" I would say, "You better hope so, because you're not going to be here long enough to get rich slow," right? In fact, I want you to think about this. Wealth, by its very definition, denotes speed. Think about that. Wealth, by its very... In fact, I'm going to take it a step further. May I take it a step further? Here it is. Wealth is measured more in time than it is in money. What do I mean by that? If you make $1 million, are you rich? And the answer, some people say yeah, some people say no, some people will get the right answer, which is, it depends. If you make $1 million, are you rich? Well, if you make $25,000 a year, right, and you work for 40 years, that's $1 million. Are you rich? The answer is a big, fat, juicy no. Why? Because it took you too long to make it. But if you make $1 million in 12 months, are you rich? Well, you ain't Bill Gates rich, but you're rich. If you make $1 million a year, you're 40 times richer than this person. Right? So what changed? Well, the amount of money didn't change. What changed? What changed was the amount of time it took you to make it. 40 years versus 1 year. So when you make $1 million a year, you're 40 times richer than the person who makes $1 million in 40 years. So wealth by its very nature is measured by speed and not by how much money. Watch this. What if you make $1 million a month? Now you're 12 times richer than the person who makes $1 million a year, and you're 480 times richer than the person who makes $1 million over 40 years. Do you see how simple this is? This is like simple 5th grade math. But it sounds like a get-rich-quick scheme. You ain't gonna be here long enough to get rich slow. Baby, put your foot on the gas and take your foot off the brake. Right? So we've avoided so many things that could have already created millions of dollars. All of us, everybody watching this video on YouTube right now, all the people in the Zoom room right now, all the people in the world right now, we've already passed on millions, well, maybe not millions. We've already passed in our lifetime, even if you're in your 20s, you've already passed on at least hundreds of million-dollar opportunities. Because how many of you were alive in 2012? Well, guess what happened in 2012? My son told me about Bitcoin in 2012. 2012. When it was like, I don't know, $12? What? It might not even been that much. It might have been 12 cents. I don't know. It was crazy cheap. 2012. I was like, that can't work. That doesn't even make any sense. Right? And now, anytime my son tells me anything, I just listen to him. I'm like, okay, let's do that, right? like, what? He could see something that I couldn't see. I didn't even investigate it. I just discounted it. How many of us heard about Bitcoin long before we got any cryptocurrency? I didn't start accumulating cryptocurrency until 2017. And when I first bought my first Bitcoin, it was $1,540. Man, I could have got a lot more of it in 2012. If I had listened to my son in 2012 and took advantage of the opportunity I could have taken advantage of, I could literally be a billionaire today instead of a multimillionaire. So we're allowing our filters to cause us to pass on opportunities that can make our lives greater. But that brings me to my last point, which is this. People will never behave consistently in a way that's inconsistent with their programming, and people will never behave consistently in a way that's inconsistent with their self-identity. So, what does that mean? That means if your programming says that business opportunity, it doesn't matter if it's the internet, it doesn't matter if it's Shopify or Amazon or e-commerce or information marketing or affiliate marketing or starting an agent, it doesn't matter. If your programming says, that sounds like a scam because they're charging you money, so it must be a scam. Okay, well, but in that case, then college is a scam, right? They charge you money. The government's definitely a scam. They charge you money just for existing. And if you have a business, they double scam you because they force you to collect taxes for them and remit them to the government, and you have to pay for it, right? So that's a scam, right? Pharmaceuticals are a scam. Hospitals are a scam. So if just because somebody's charging you for something that makes it a scam, then everything's a scam. You see what I'm saying? But our programming likes to paint in broad strokes, right? And so what's really interesting is we'll never behave consistently in a way that's inconsistent with our programming, and we'll also never behave consistently in a way that's inconsistent with our self-identity. Now, here's what we have to do. We have to recognize that that's all of those are million-dollar fantasy. I'm going to talk to you about the million-dollar reality now. So I'm going to give you the main million-dollar fantasy that's keeping you broke. Or maybe not even broke, just stuck at your current level. You might be stuck at $30,000 a month, or $50,000 a month, or $100,000 a month. You might be stuck at $50,000 a year, or $30,000 a year, or $100,000 a year. I don't know, $250,000 a year. It doesn't matter. But whatever you're at, you're stuck. And see, one of the things I know about human beings, we were not created to be stuck. We were created to be progressively productive, which means today should be better than yesterday, generally. This week should be better than last week, generally. This month should be better than last month, generally. This year should be better than last year. This decade should be better than last decade. Our lives should be getting progressively productive and getting better over time. Okay, now, that's the premise. But here's what we've all been taught. The reason your life isn't getting better is because you bought into this idea, if what you're working on isn't working, try harder. That is one of the greatest fallacies of all times. So what you're telling me then is when it's not working, work harder on it and expend more energy on it when it's not working. So work harder at what's not working, and that's the formula for success. I'm just going to let you sit with that for a minute. Right? Did it make your brain explode? Like, work harder at what's not working? Well, that's not very smart. So instead of working harder at what's not working, let's apply a scientific formula to changing our current circumstance. Everybody okay with that? Here it is. If you don't like the output, change the input. Like it's used in medicine, right? If you don't like the output, change the input, right? If you don't like the result, change the stimulus. So let's say I don't like the outcome of my current income. So what I've got to do is I've got to change the input. So here's the problem. Most people want to have, in fact, I'm going to move that over. So I'm going to do it a different way. Most people want to have more. We could call that have more money, have more time, have more love, have more great relationships, have more whatever. Most people want to have more. But having is an output. In fact, we could conclude that it is the ultimate output that most people are focused on. People want to have a nicer car. They want to have a nicer house. They want to have more money. They want to have better vacations. They want to have a better relationship. They want to have. But see, have is an output. So you don't achieve that output by trying harder to have that output. That's not a formula. If you don't like the output, what do you change? You change the input. So, watch this. The input for having is to do more. Oh, okay. So instead of just wanting to have more, now I've got to do more. But guess what? Doing is the input for having. But doing also is an output. Are you ready for the input for the output of doing? Okay, the input is be more. So it all starts with being. So we have to become more than we've been being, and then and only then can we do more than we've been doing, and then and only then do we deserve to have more than we've been having. And I am telling you, if you don't start leveling up from the foundation of being more than you've been, then you will never do more than you're doing. And you'll never have more than you're having. Here's what's really interesting. We all want to have more. And we could put all kinds of stuff over here. We could put love, we could put money, we could put love, right? That was supposed to be a heart, but it wasn't a very good one. Might as well, if I write it in red, it'll probably be a better heart, right? So it could be love, right? We could want more, better house, better car, whatever, right? It could be a house, right? It could be better car. We just want to have a better experience of life. But if you want to have more, desiring to have more is not the way you have more. Working harder at having more is not the way you have more. What do you have to do? You have to do more than you've been doing. Now, here's what's really interesting about doing more. Doing more is what people attempt to do. That's what trying harder is, attempting to do more. But what happens? Most of the time, by the way, let me say this. God designed it so your desire to have more is God-given. God gave you the desire to have more. He gave you the desire to have better relationships, the desire to have more money, the desire to have a longer life, the desire to have more health, the desire to have better relationships. God is the one who gave you the desire for all of those things. Why? Because he knew when your desire to have more was great enough, when that internal stimulus was great enough, you'd finally go ahead and yield to doing more. And he knew that when you attempted to do more, you would bump your head on your inability and stub your toe on your inability and finally yield to the thing he cares about most, and that is becoming more than you've been being. This is the secret sauce. See, being speaks to my identity, whereas doing speaks to my activity. And then having speaks to my property. Everybody wants the property. Very few people are willing to do the activity. Or a lot of people who are willing to do the activity are unable to do the activity because they haven't owned the identity. You will never behave consistently in a way that's inconsistent with who you see yourself as being. So until you begin to own the identity, you will never have the ability to do the activity. And until you start doing the activity, you'll never own the property. Now, which tells me that in identity, activity, and property, just like we talk about, like you know me if you listen to me for any length of time, you know I love the sciencey stuff. You know I like the geeky stuff, right? So the law of energy, everything's energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, it just changes form. right? The law of entropy, anything left to itself tends to move more and more towards disorder. If I plant a garden and I don't pull the weeds are the entropy that will destroy the garden, right? And so what's really interesting, energy is always required. Energy and intention are always required to keep entropy from destroying our momentum. Right? There's the law of momentum. An object in motion will continue in motion unless it's acted upon by an outside force. The law of inertia. An object at rest will remain at rest unless it's acted upon by an outside force. But remember we talked about the law of polarity? Right? What is the law of polarity? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. For every positive, there's a negative. Every negative, there's a positive. Right? And so what we do because we have confirmation bias, when we look at a situation, we apply our confirmation bias to that situation. We say, this is bad. Or we say, this is good. But the reality is, it's both, right? Why? Because it's impossible for anything to exist with only one side. Have you ever seen a one-sided piece of paper? Probably not. Have you ever seen a one-sided piece of bread? I don't think so. Have you ever seen a one-sided pancake? One-sided coin? No. Why? Because they cannot exist. If something has one side, it has to have the other side. This is where most people run into trouble. So when I'm looking at identity, let's say identity, I've got an identity capacity. The fullness of my identity capacity is me being all that I can be, right? The negative of my identity capacity is me not being anything I can be. Most of us are somewhere right down in here. So this difference between who we are and who we could be, there's a gap. There's a gap in our identity. By the way, we're all familiar with the gap in our identity. I'm going to make this smaller and move it over. There we go. We're all familiar. We all know intuitively there's a gap in our identity, don't we? How many of y'all know there's a gap in your identity, right? Right? All of us have a gap. I got a gap, you got a gap, everybody's got a gap, right? I'm not talking about a gap in our teeth. I'm talking about a gap in our identity, right? The difference between who we are and who we could be. Now, the ultimate question becomes, how do I fill the gap in my identity and become more of who I can be? And the answer is, and by the way, this is true for every successful person I've ever met. How do I fill the gap in my identity? I fill the gap in my identity with a concept called intentionality. What is intentionality? Intentionality is I am hyper intentional about everything I think about and everything I do. I don't do anything by happenstance, but I do everything by intention. Are y'all tracking? So what happens is when I focus on improving my intentionality, everything in my life improves. When I'm not haphazard, when I'm not lazy, when I'm not distracted, those are the enemies of intentionality. In fact, I submit to you that the primary mechanism that the culture hypnotic societal mechanism has used to program most people to be sick, broke, misinformed, and fearful is distraction. The common denominator of most people who struggle is this, in my opinion. They focus on distraction and ignore intention. The common denominator of uber successful people in any field of life is they focus on intention and ignore distraction. Now, if I just said that and I didn't define what I mean by distraction and intention, I'd be leaving you guys hanging. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you the breakdown. Y'all ready? Here it is. Intention is anything that I focus on that moves the needle in my favor. It's reading books. It's being honest. It's being diligent. It's being conscientious. All of those things are moving the needle. I'm intentionally focused on things that make my life better. What do I mean when I say distraction? Anything that doesn't move the needle in my favor. A favorite television show, listening to the radio, watching the news, watching a movie, playing games. Anything that doesn't move the needle in my favor is a distraction. Especially most entertainment is designed as a distraction. Imagine how much clear thinking could you have? How much work could you get done if you just came out of surgery and you were waking up from anesthesia? Not much, right? Well, what if the cultural hypnotic societal mechanism has created an anesthetic called entertainment that we use to anesthetize ourselves so we don't have to think about the fact that our life isn't working and then feel all the pain of that. And that's exactly what most people do. They say, my team won, and your team don't even know you exist. So guess what? They may be your team, but you ain't on their team. They don't know you. They don't send you a check. They don't help feed your children. And you're like spending hours you're broke and spending hours watching other people live their dreams while you're living a nightmare. It doesn't make sense. That's what I call being focused on distraction and ignoring intention. I know, one of my brothers, I won't tell you which one of my brothers said, he told me, like, after I became successful, he said, man, I used to come to your house. You lived in these raggedy houses, and you always had these books around about how to be a millionaire, and I was so mad at you, and I couldn't figure out, why doesn't he just get a job and do like the rest of us? Because I don't want what the rest of y'all have. I don't want to be comfortably miserable for the rest of my life. And so I was focusing on intention. And by the way, when you first start focusing on intention, don't expect the people around you to see the needle moving, because the first needle that moves is the internal needle. When you start living your life on purpose, don't expect the people around you to see the payoff, because sometimes the payoff don't happen until months later. Sometimes the payoff don't happen until years later. But see, if you can stay focused on the things that move the needle and stay focused on intention, what's going to happen is over time, you're going to fill up this gap in your identity to the point where now you can start focusing on filling up the gap in your activity. Because the difference, like your activity, maximizing your activity looks like you're doing everything you can do to make your life better. Not maximizing on your activity looks like you're doing none of the things you can do to make your life better. We were in the Dominican Republic, and we were being driven to the airport by a car company. And one of the things that happens is there are kids, like literally kids, like 14, 16 years old. And what they'll do is they'll come up with a bottle of water and a windshield wiper that's not on anything, but it's in their hand. They'll spray the water in there and they'll clean your windshield for a tip, right? And so we came up and we stopped, and the driver said, "No, go away." But he's from the Dominican. I loved the entrepreneurial spirit I saw in those children. I said, "Oh, no, clean the window, man, clean the window." I put my window down, gave him, I don't know, $5, right? Then we stopped at another light. Another kid comes up. "Guys, go away. No, clean the window. Now, put your window down. It's fine. Let him clean it. Here, give him this," right? And I did it predominantly because they were kids and they were willing to work on making their life better. And I wanted to show them that what they were working on was working. Are y'all tracking? So if we're doing nothing, most of us are down here, we're doing some of the stuff we can do to make our life better. But how do we fill the gap? There's a gap. There's also a gap in our activity. You are not doing everything you can do. How do I know? Because I ain't doing everything I can do. I ain't the only one, right? So, how do I fill this gap? Well, I fill this gap I fill with intentionality. This gap I fill with ingenuity. What's ingenuity? Ingenuity is the ability to observe, analyze, try a new approach. Observe, analyze, try a new approach. Somebody said, a reporter came to Thomas Edison and said, "Mr. Edison, why did you keep going? You failed 10,000 times. Why did you keep going to discover a light bulb?" And they say that Edison said, "Well, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways that wouldn't work, and now I found a way that would." Boom. That's called ingenuity. I got started in sales in October of 1985. I didn't make my first sale until April of 1987. After I made my first sale, within months, I was the top salesperson in our office month after month after month after month after month. Why? Because I went through in that year and a half, people said, and somebody asked me one time, they said, "Myron, how did you go from not being able to make a sale to becoming the top salesperson after you made a sale?" Easy. I found all the ways I went through all the ways that wouldn't work. All I had left were ways that would. And once I found a way that worked, I didn't get bored with it. I just got paid with it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And I just kept doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. While other salespeople, they had some success, but they'd go out and tweak it. They had a little more success, they'd go out and tweak it again. That's not how we do it, right? And so what you've got to do is you've got to start filling the gap with ingenuity. Here's what most people do. They will get started as an entrepreneur. They'll launch a program. Nobody buys it. They'll say, "It didn't work." What are we, in the third grade? Like, are we in kindergarten? It didn't work. What does that mean? Like you tried one approach and it didn't do what you thought it was going to do and you said it didn't work. Well, I've got good news for you. All work works. What do I mean all work works? The scripture says in all labor there is profit. So all work works. What I mean when I say all work works, the thing you are working on is also working on you. Your job is to let it work on you until you become the person for whom it can work. How many of y'all tracking? What I'm saying making sense? Like, you need to become the person. You need to work on it until, let it work on you. When it's not working for you, it's working on you. Right? So you're working on something and it didn't do what you thought it was going to do, but you learned something. What does that mean? It worked on you. You have to let the things you're working on work on you until you become the person for whom they can work. Because if all you're doing is looking for, I'm going to work on this thing and if it pays me, I'm going to keep doing it, you are never going to create wealth for your family. Why? Because most of the things you work on aren't going to work for you in the beginning. They're going to work on you in the beginning. And the test is, are you willing to let them work on you until you become the person they can work for, right? So ingenuity is trying a different approach, and then another approach, and then another approach, and then another approach, and then another approach. And then when you find one that works, don't get bored with it, get paid with it. But most people, they'll try 3 things. They won't get paid. They'll say, well, that didn't work. I'm going to go try something else. So they lose all the momentum that they gathered from the first thing, and then they go start something new. And they're always starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And 10 years from now, they're still going to be starting and stopping and starting and stopping. Why? They never stuck with anything long enough to build momentum. That's what ingenuity does for you. Ingenuity helps you build momentum. And you keep trying a different approach. When I was in elementary school, my dad could fix anything. Right? He could fix anything. And I loved working with my dad because I loved watching him work these miracles with these tools. It was crazy, right? I remember one time we were working on this old raggedy car in our yard when we lived in Lewistown, Pennsylvania. I was in elementary school. We're working on this car, and we worked on it literally all morning. We were taking the exhaust manifold off, and we were working on taking the exhaust manifold off all morning, and we had one bolt left, and it wouldn't come off. And we tried heating it up with a torch, and that didn't work. We tried a chisel, and that didn't work. And we tried WD-40, and that didn't work. I'm like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And so we finally took a break for lunch. I said, Dad, it's not coming off. He said, oh, it's coming off. It's coming off. He said, you want to know why it's coming off, son? I said, yes, sir. He said, because we have a brain and it don't have a brain. I'm like, oh, we have a brain. It don't have a brain. So I knew, that's one of the most valuable lessons I've learned in my life. If I'm working on something that doesn't have a brain, it can't compete with me. Why? I got a brain that don't have a brain. How's something that don't have a brain gonna beat me? And I got a brain, right? And I learned that in elementary school. And some of us are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and we still haven't learned it yet. So we fill the gap in our activity with our ingenuity. And then what happens? Then we have a gap in our property. The gap in our property we fill with opportunity. And when we see an opportunity, we say yes when other people say no. And when we say yes when other people say no, most people say yes to this many things. Like I said no to my son in 2012, Bitcoin, I'd be a billionaire today, right? But since that time, I've said yes to a whole lot more opportunities. And I'm not a billionaire, but we make, 7 figures a month, which is not hurtful, right? And so what happens is everybody wants to fill the gap here with the opportunity, but here's the problem. Until you become intentional and fill this gap, you won't see the opportunity when it presents itself. It'll just look like a scam. Until you fill the gap in your identity, you won't perceive the opportunity as an opportunity. You'll just perceive the opportunity as a risk. You'll just perceive the opportunity as a get-rich-quick scheme. Until you fill the identity gap, if you come across an opportunity, you will misperceive it. And you're going to come across fewer opportunities until you start using ingenuity to fill your activity gap and start figuring out how to add skills to your skill set. Now, the $1 million reality happens when you start having millionaire intentionality. And you're focused on things that get you closer to becoming a millionaire and ignore things that are a distraction. Like, my daughter will tell you, she was 16 years old before we had a television. Why? Because I didn't want to watch other people live their dreams while I was living a nightmare. She was 16. Like, people say, Myron, you don't have a TV? Nope. Why don't you have a TV? So somebody can tell me my vision. I don't need a television for somebody to tell me my vision. I already know my vision, right? And literally, we didn't have cable. We would buy those, I forgot what they're called, but the Christian cartoons for our kids, like the story of Joseph and the story of David and all that. But we didn't have cable, so we couldn't watch TV shows, right? We were intentional about what we would view on television. I would watch motivational speeches. I would watch videotapes of people like Art Williams. Why? Because I wanted to decide what went in here. I didn't want somebody else to decide that for me. I didn't want to be distracted by distractions. Like I remember being in elementary school. I'm going to end this video here pretty soon, but I remember being in elementary school and thinking to myself, as kids were telling me all the stats of all these baseball players that were on our baseball cards. They knew how many home runs they had and how many bases stolen and how many. I'm like, why would you? And I remember thinking in elementary school, why would you fill up your mind with that much information about somebody's life who doesn't even know you exist? I was confused by that as a child. And there are so many people who are experts on information that does not move the needle. What does that mean? That means you've been so focused on distraction, you are an expert on distraction and a novice on intention. And I'm telling you, when you flip the script on that game, you will change your $1 million fantasy into a potential $1 million reality. And unless you become more intentional and less distracted, I promise you, your $1 million desire will always be a fantasy. So don't stay stuck like Chuck in a pickup truck. Be more through intentionality. Do more through ingenuity, and you'll have more because you'll seize opportunity. That's how you go from $1 million fantasy to $1 million reality. I hope this helps you. Make sure you like this YouTube video, comment, share it with other people. Show the people you love some love by sharing this content with them. Oh, and by the way, if you all haven't seen my TEDx talk, all you got to do if you want to see it is look it up on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Myron Golden TEDx. That TEDx talk was uploaded on June 1st of this year. It's already got like 800 and something thousand views in like 2.5 months. It's crazy. So, and it's game changer. So go check out the TEDx talk. In the meantime, in between time, I'll look forward to talking to y'all. Peace out, Cub Scouts.